Hello and welcome back to the Ask an Introvert podcast. I'm Jennifer Ho, your host and life coach for introverts. Today we're going to talk about how celebrating yourself can feel cringy. And this year I had quite the audacious birthday celebration. It's part of my mission to be bolder, dream bigger, and really live the life that I sometimes think I can't have, but is really the life that I want and love. So it's been a few years since I started calling the month of January JENNuary because as an introvert, it really does take me the whole month to celebrate. I have to space out social events to manage my energy and really prevent myself from depleting my entire capacity. And, it started out as like, all these people would want to have birthday dinners with me or some kind of celebration. And I would prefer the one-on-ones and the small gatherings. And so it's been a long, long time since I actually threw a party where I put the spotlight on myself. And I got used to it being like, okay, I'd have a special dinner with my best friend and I'd hang out with my family. My sisters and other friends would take me out. And it's like at the same time, while all of that happens, ever since I decided to have this online business, the celebrating has become more public. And along the way, it's really become more than just me making time with my loved ones because I share it online now. And leading into this year, January 2025, I started to think about what I want to do to really, really celebrate myself in a novel way. Because life in my 30s hasn't looked like how I imagined it. Is it what I enjoy and want and love? Yes. But I still felt like I could challenge myself. And that's my Capricorn, my self-development nerd coming out, that I want to intentionally challenge myself. But I really did want to stretch in my capacity to celebrate myself because here I am. I celebrate all month. I do all these things, and then I am also publicly sharing it. But what if I tried to stretch my capacity and I did have that party where I put the spotlight on myself? And I started to think about what's the most Jennifer way that I could do this. And I always thought at this point in my life, I'd have my own home and that I'd be hosting dinner parties all the time. And as an introvert, I do love being in that seat of control because then I know what to expect. But I live in an apartment where I don't have space to host everyone. I don't have enough furniture, to cook that much, and I definitely don't want to end up with all the dishes. So I was like, okay, how do I do this? And as I'm thinking about that, another challenge pops up in my head. It's like, oh, but can I ask people to travel for me? Because my friends are all over the place. And as I thought about this, I also worried, like, how much is this gonna cost? And okay, what if I do bring all my friends in one room and they don't like each other? And then I also started to question, like, am I important enough? Is this birthday important enough? Like, it's not like it's a wedding. And I caught my brain saying these things. I'm like, what's really going on here? I really had to take a step back and put my own coach hat on for myself. Like, my autopilot brain is just turning this all into a big scary mess. This is going to be a burden to your friends. You're not going to find the right space, and they're all going to be mad at you that they have to go meet strangers. And of course, with all these kinds of thoughts, I started to feel really scared and anxious. Like as I'm repeating it now, I feel a little antsy. So I really, really, really had to calm myself down and to zoom out. Let's zoom out and explore this. Like, okay, we are freaking out, not because like doing this is impossible, but I think we're freaking out because we really want this and we're going to be disappointed if it doesn't happen. And so everything is trying to work itself out in a way that protects us from that disappointment. And I was like, oh, like if you're watching the video, I'm patting my own shoulders, like I have to hug myself through this. So that's exactly what I did. I gave myself space, and I'm like, okay, like in a way, we kind of like already thought this through. So first, let's see if this event is possible. So we gotta find the location. We gotta make sure we have the money for it, and then we can worry about what the guest list looks like. So, of course, with me living in Sacramento, I'm like, okay, let's see what my options are in Sacramento. I started to search for private dining rooms at restaurants. I searched for private chefs. I searched for cooking classes. And I felt like all these options are like plan F, like not even a plan B. So I was like, okay, where am I limiting myself here? Because this is what all this is really about. Because if I'm thinking about it from the self-leadership perspective, like the lesson that I'm teaching myself is to not put limits and conditions on the things that I want. And so every time that I find some kind of obstacle, it's like, am I going to go through it, around it, demolish it? What's going to happen? Because there's definitely a way. So I was like, okay, some of my friends that I want to invite are gonna have to travel for this. What if I also include myself in the I have to travel bucket? Where am I willing to go? So I think within my state of California, there's two cities where there's always stuff happening, San Francisco and LA. San Francisco's closer to me, so I started doing a search there. And as soon as I like get past this little mental hurdle, I'm feeling pretty good because I'm reminded that, all right, I start with Sacramento because that's my comfort zone, right? And I know that this comfort zone is always going to be here. So it's totally okay for me to go somewhere else. And then after that, my comfort zone is just going to expand. And so I started to look in San Francisco, and I end up finding this dream chef because she hosts cooking classes and dinners in her own home. I was like, this is it. This is it. Everything I want in one package. So I share her website with my best friend who lives in San Francisco, and my friend's like, I'm going to her class this weekend. And I was like, yes. Now it's not like I'm taking some crazy big chance. Like if my best friend signs off, then I know that this is what I'm gonna do. So she goes and she has the best time. But she's also like talking to the chef and finds out that chef is traveling in January. And so before anything even starts for me, I felt like all my hopes were crushed, and I started looking for backup plans and other ways. And this is probably like early fall 2024 when it's happening. And then October rolls around, and I'm like counting down. There's 3 to 4-ish months until my birthday. I know I'm going to ask some people who live across the world to come to this. I need to tell them soon, but what do I do? My brain is stuck on this one chef, and I'm not looking for any other solutions in terms of finding somewhere else or someone else. And so I start thinking, okay, what if instead of celebrating my 33rd birthday, I celebrate my 33.3? Because a year's got 12 months. And so I can have a clean split into 4 months being 1/3. And so that would be May when I host a party. It'll be my 33rd and 1/3 birthday. So let's just email the chef and see if she's available in May. Normally, I'm pretty straightforward, but I was like, I kind of want to tell my story. I'm like, my birthday's in January, but I heard you're traveling, so I was thinking about doing this in May instead. The chef responds back really quickly, and she's like, I am traveling in January, but I'll be back in January as well. And this is where I'm like, oh my God, I should have just asked her to start with. I should have just checked directly, but I just was putting it off. And I just took information through the grapevine like it was the truth. And I had stressed for several weeks on my own about trying to find something just as good instead of just inquiring directly. Okay, so chef responded back. I secured a date. I'm like, this is great. And I felt relieved for like a whole 2 seconds. And then my autopilot brain started playing all the other thoughts. We're still worried about the cost and the guest list. So cost wise, I get that information from the chef. I pay the deposit. That was easy. I'm like, okay, I know exactly what to do to get the rest of this. I'm not going to ask my friends to contribute, and if they want to, I will let them know, but I just want everyone here, and I'm going to make it possible by paying upfront for this private dinner and cooking class. Now, what started to stump me next is the guest list. So, the minimum amount of people to book this event is eight. So, including myself, I would then have to get seven people to show up for me. And then the maximum is 12. So I get to invite 7 to 11 people. I started to worry if I could meet the minimum, and then more mental gymnastics ensued. So remember how originally my brain was like, oh, you're gonna burden your friends and they might not get along and they might be mad at you for forcing them to meet each other. Oh my goodness. I started to get really anxious. But I'm like, okay, like there are some people who are just given. You know, my best friend who already went to one of the chef's cooking classes, I knew she would be there. My sisters, I asked them. Only one of them could make it. So then now I had two people. And then when I got the confirmation from the chef, there was a friend who I was with in LA, and I asked her, and she said yes. Okay, so now I got three people. I gotta find four more. Ooh, okay, so I started to see how I could definitely get the minimum eight, and then I made a whole list of everybody I would love to have in this space, and I was like, oh my goodness, now I'm worried about all the people I can't invite. And it's just like, if I just let my brain like worry a little bit, it just freaking runs with it. But this is where self-leadership comes in, right? So remember, this whole thing is about challenge myself to celebrate bigger, increasing my capacity, and is also about claiming what I really want in life and figuring out how to do it. No limits, no conditions that are self-imposed. All right. Oh, so again, I zoomed out. Look, we're just gonna have to take this one invite at a time. We look at this list and we already know like everyone on this list is our friend. Everyone on this list would be happy to be invited. Everyone on this list, if they can't make it or are not invited, would be happy to see you living your best life. They would be happy to witness any of that. They would be happy for us. I really, really, really had to remind myself of this because I think about how I make friends and how I approach my friendships and what I want for them. And if they're happy, then why would I be upset? And if I do feel upset, if I feel like a little bit slighted for not being invited or not being included or feeling like I'm missing out, those feelings are my responsibility. So, my friends, they can also take care of themselves. And we bring this all back to this is about Jennifer celebrating Jennifer. And if Jennifer is going to think about everyone else, that's not how self-celebration works. This is the space for me to be audacious, to be bold. And if I'm feeling cringe about it, then to me, that's a signal that I feel that I'm unworthy or undeserving in some way. And when all of that clicked for me, I'm like, oh, ooh, this is really going to be something where I'm leading by example. And it's really quite uncomfortable. So that part of me that loved the challenge, that loves the self-development, I was just like, wow, I'm really creating a lot of discomfort for myself right now. Speaking of which, I have a tiny challenge for you, one introvert to another. It's super doable. Send me a DM on Instagram at by Jennifer Ho, starting with the three words I want to, followed by that one thing you've been wanting to do that you feel like is a little too much. The thing that you would feel is really a nice way to celebrate yourself, but it feels like you're not there yet. Maybe it's host a dinner, maybe it's take a solo trip, maybe it's send a message to that person you've been admiring from across the world. No explanation needed. No pressure to respond to any of my replies. Just put it out there. Because sometimes naming what we want is the first step to making it happen. And if you've been following along, you'll see that all the things I wanted, as I started to ask for them, as I started to look for them, they came together. So remember how I looked for private dinner space, private chef, cooking class, catered dinner, someone else doing the dishes. All of that came together for this event. Now, the next thing that I had to ask for, that I had to name and put out in the world was to actually invite friends who are not local. So, as some of you may know, I have quite the group of friends based in Singapore, and I've got friends in Canada, friends on the other side of the country, friends in Europe, friends in South Africa. It's like, okay, who are the people I talk to every day? And there are a couple of them in Singapore. And so, logistically, how do I do this? I looked at my list and I had to rank my friends on like who I wanted at this party. And that is hard, but that is just what people do. They end up doing this for weddings, like if you have 300 seats, you have to decide like who's in the first group that you send invites to. And after you get the responses, you know how much space you have to send to a second group. So that's how I handled this as well. Of course, I only had 11 spots, and at this point, just what I already had three people, so I just had seven more seats to fill at max. And I could stop at eight if I wanted to. But as I organized this list, I knew that I would want the room full. I wanted the maximum amount of people possible. And so I sent off the invites to my friends who are not local, and I thought back and forth about how I would phrase this because it felt like a huge ask. Well, I got one yes pretty quickly from someone who is across the world. It turns out that she was speaking at an event in the US, and so she could make a stop in California before she went on the rest of her trip. And I was like, wow. I was in disbelief. Like, I feel like I would do this for my friends, but to give them the opportunity to do this for me and actually show up for me is like, wow. I realize that while I may have shown up for other people in this way, like traveled the world to show up for some life event for them, I hadn't quite allowed myself to be open to this, to be open to letting others show up for me in that way. And when I got this yes, though, I was like, okay, like I really don't have to worry about this. Really, people will decide for themselves. I'm not going to decide for them if they go or not. All I can decide is if I'm going to invite them or not. That's what's in my control. And as I focus on what's in my control, I didn't have to push through the anxiety anymore because it kind of dissolved the anxiety. And so I felt much more relaxed as I sent out the next set of invites. And by the end of December, we filled all 12 spots. I looked at the list of people I confirmed and I'm like, this is gonna be so good. And then I looked at the list of people that I didn't get to invite, or the people who I did invite but couldn't make it. And I'm like, you know, this is just gonna motivate me to stretch myself more in the future, because I'm going to bring people together again in some way. Anyway, so that's how all of this came together. If we're going to cultivate the spirit of ask an introvert, I think in terms of takeaways, I would say, so if you were to ask me like what I would tell you if you're struggling to celebrate yourself, I'd say, the example I just gave you is really big. But there are so many other ways that I have practiced celebrating myself before I got to this. It will feel like a big, big, big effort, but it can be as simple as going to get the ice cream that you want, but you were just waiting for someone else to ask you. But don't wait anymore. Go do that. It can be, in the moments when you're like, oh, like, how come we don't make a big deal about things like getting a promotion or getting a new job? Like, why don't we do something big for those things? I want you to do it for yourself. It really starts with that before you bring in other people, because even if other people that are there to celebrate you, if you cannot celebrate yourself, it's going to feel weird through the whole process. And even if you try to hide it, people are gonna sense, oh, maybe this person is uncomfortable with this. Maybe they don't want the spotlight. And so then to cater to you, people are going to pull back from that. So think about what you really want here and how you can kind of okay, this is where your comfort zone is now and what you want to, and whatever is outside of it that you want to expand your comfort zone to, start seeing how those things aren't separate, but how they can start to exist in relation to each other, because your comfort zone can grow. And for an introvert, the bigger your comfort zone is, the more energized you'll be by all the things that you do in your life. I think that's really how you can balance your need for peace and comfort along with your desire to celebrate. Yeah. So in the next part two, I will share about the actual celebration. So the week leading up to it, the celebration itself, and how I felt after. But this is my journey of doing my birthday bigger, bolder, and with more audacity, and also fulfilling a lifelong dream. I know now that I have options to make my dreams come true, even if I might not have the correct circumstances, like having a big enough home for dinner parties of 12 or more. This is where I'm at now, and I figured out something that works for me, and I'm really proud of myself. Now, before we wrap up, remember my tiny challenge for you. DM me on Instagram at @byjenniferho, starting with I want to, followed by that one thing you've been wanting to celebrate but haven't yet. I know you have something in mind, and at the least, I can help you figure out how to make it happen. If you're curious about how my dinner party turns out, stay tuned for the next episode. That's what I want to leave you with today. If there's anything about this or something else you want to ask me and get my thoughts on through the podcast, DM me or submit it anonymously at byjenniferho.com/askanintrovert. By the way, if you've been wanting to cultivate self leadership for yourself to make things easier as you create your dream life, I am accepting new clients into the Take Root into Self Leadership program. You can book your complimentary discovery call at the link in the show notes to get started. I will be back soon. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening and turn on your notifications so you won't miss the next episode. I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Bye.